David Maurer, he's a political consultant to both Republicans and Democrats in the great state of Alabama. He's chairman of the Maurer Consulting Group. Great to see both of you. So, David, you've worked on both Republican and Democratic campaigns in the state. What does this special election come down to, other than, don't give me the turnout? I know it's always turnout, but what does the special election come down to?
You nailed me, because that's the cliche, right? But it comes down to, but what drives that is that don't ever underestimate the fact that Alabamians don't like to be told what to do. Okay, we got an appointed senator, and we got, you know, the president saying, okay, you have to vote for him. And so that, I think, is where some of the backlash comes from. And I think it comes down to, have they done a, you know, it comes down to money versus that backlash.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, so if endorsements mean bunk, but does that then mean that a win for Roy Moore, David, is a loss for Donald Trump? I mean, what does it mean?
You know, I don't think so. I think that it's just one of those things that people underestimated the political dynamics on the ground. There have been questions about the way that Senator Strange got the appointment, right or wrong.
From the embattled governor, yeah.
But yeah, and I think that that's just kind of stuck in people's craw, and so they're being told what to do there. They're being told what to do by the Senate Leadership Fund, and it's just one of those things where a lot of voters just go, you know, look, it's not that I really like this other guy. It's just that I don't like what you guys are trying to tell me to do, so I'm going to backlash and vote, you know, for the guy for the lightning rod.
Right. You know, and kind of to the point of like the final pitch, David, Luther Strange made his final pitch this morning on Fox News, and he basically summed it up, which was, I'm no product of Washington, don't put that on me. Listen to this.
I can assure you, Steve, if I were part of the problem, the president wouldn't be down here campaigning so hard for me. Last night we had the vice president here. I've been in Washington less time than the president has.
I mean, Luther Strange is not wrong there. Then why is he having this problem?
He's not wrong, but his having such a problem is because he hasn't done anything to emotionally connect himself via advertising, via surrogates, via whatever, to the president. It's all just, hey, this is the guy that I think that you should do. I get a mailer every day, and every day it just says, you know, I like Luther. He'll build the wall. I don't think anybody believes that Roy Moore's not going to build the wall. I don't think that anybody believes that Roy Moore isn't just as conservative as Strange, and there's the problem, because Roy Moore has that firebrand, you know, setting the woods on fire base that Alabamians have always responded to. And so I'm not really making a prediction, because it's, you know, I think it's closer than people think. Yeah. But I think there's your disconnect.
David, I want to first go to you. What are you hearing on the ground there?
Well, it's sort of like a grenade went off in the middle of the Moore camp. Everybody's kind of in disarray. But then people are immediately going to their camps. Some people are saying it's not true. Some people are saying obviously it's true, or we've heard the rumors. And everybody's worried about what happens to what happens, because they can't take him off the ballot. And this is a guy that's been thrown out of his job twice, and he hasn't, you know, and he just keeps coming back. And so there's no way he's going to drop out. And so everybody's just sort of hand-wringing right now. I think that everybody's very much trying to get a handle on where they go from here.
Scott, David, can you gut check us really quick? At this point, I mean, it's one thing to have a conversation in Washington, right, and have a bunch of politicians talking, quote-unquote establishment politicians in Washington saying what they think should or shouldn't happen. And it's something very different on the ground. And the voters on the ground are who decide who goes to the Senate. At this point, if you had to bet, do you think he wins this race?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think right now you still have to give him the advantage. I think that the Jones folks really need to take advantage of this, you know, of this interception, or, you know, this game-changing play, and they need to get Republican surrogates. They need to get established Alabama, you know, personalities to come out and say, look, hold your nose and vote for the Democrat, because we just cannot send this guy up there. He's also a guy that, you know, he was thrown out of the last two bodies that he served on, you know, the Supreme Court. And so it's not like he's known as being a team player. Right. But I just think right now you still have to give him, you just have to give the advantage to Moore. The guy has won election after election. The closest that he's come was in 2012. Bob Vance ran within about 3 points of him. And so the Jones folks need to pour on money, and they need to pour on the right type of message to get him across the line. But I'd say that that's still, you know, less than 50-50 chance.
David, can I ask, as you lay it out like that, why do people keep supporting this guy?
You know, I think that is a question that a lot of Alabamians have behind closed doors and in hushed conversations in bars and things like that. Everyone says, who the heck votes for him? I don't know anybody that votes for him, and he just keeps winning. And so I think that's one of life's ponderables, Kate. I'm just not sure.
A life ponderable. You know, we do a lot of or not even close do we do life ponderables on this show. But here's another life ponderable. Why does it seem there is a different standard when it comes to media, entertainment, and business than there is in politics today? Ponder that. Great to see you guys. Thank you so much.
And David Mowry is an Alabama political consultant in the middle of the political blast zone. So, David, I'm going to start with you. How is this playing in Alabama?
I like your term blast zone because I think it's like, you know, somebody just toss a grenade into the middle of everything here. You know, it's roiled everybody. A lot of people don't really know how to take it. There's a bit of what we just heard from Bannon, you know, it's fake news, it's this, it's that. But I think there's a lot that, you know, there have always been a lot of people, even in the Republican Party, that were uncomfortable with Roy Moore and his brand of politics. And this just feeds into that. But the problem is that they can't take him off the ballot. They can't really mount a write-in. And I'm not sure how many of them are going to hold their nose and vote for the Democrat. So it's just very, like I said, blast zone is a very good metaphor for that.
So it is quite possible, David, that Judge Roy Moore will survive this and serve in the U.S. Senate.
Yes, I think, you know, if you're a betting person, it's better than 50-50 odds. The guy just seems to keep winning. The closest that anybody's ever ran to him as a Democrat was 5 years ago in the Chief Justice race. They got within about 3 points. But just couldn't get over the hump. There's just so many straight-ticket voters. The question, I think, is what this does to turnout, maybe, and do some of those people stay home, and, you know, can the Jones people energize their base? But I think, you know, if you're a betting person, you probably say, Roy Moore's going to be our senator.
All right, I have to leave it there. John Phillips, Bill Press, David Mowry, thanks to all of you.
Thanks. How is this going over in Alabama?
I think it's going over kind of like somebody just tossed a grenade in the middle of a garden party.
Analyst David Mowry says Moore is dividing Republicans. Establishment moderates say he's unfit for office, but the state's hard religious right stands behind him. One compared Moore to a Bible story, saying Mary was a teenager and Joseph was an adult carpenter. They became parents of Jesus. There's just nothing immoral or illegal here, maybe just a little bit unusual.
There's just no way that he is going to drop out. I mean, he thinks that this is his, you know, God-given destiny.
And growing pressure tonight to push Moore off the ballot. Several Republicans pulled their support. The party stopped financing his campaign. Even the state's governor has been urged to move the mid-December election date to find someone else. Richard Madden, CTV News, Washington.
I want to bring in David Mowry. He is a political consultant, and he ran Bob Vance's campaign against Roy Moore back in 2012. So, David, what's your assessment of how Roy Moore handled this today at this veterans event?
I mean, I don't think that there's any other way that he can handle it. You have to, you know, he has to say, oh, it's these enemies of me, and they've always, you know, these are the same people that helped remove me from the bench twice. And basically, he's just, you know, trying to create an enemy and trying to get his supporters to say, you know, this is obviously false or whatever. I don't think there's anything else he can do. Will it work? That's a good question.
He says, and he questions this happening just 4.5 weeks, you know, ahead of the vote. Why now? His supporters are asking the same thing. Is he helping to put the allegations to rest, or do his comments help keep it alive in terms of not answering so many questions about why?
I don't know that there's a way that he can really put these to rest. This is going to be what the message is. This is going to be what they're going to have to fight on for the next 30 days or so. And, you know, it wouldn't surprise me. Obviously, he's talking about they're going to, you know, reveal the motivations. So he's going to start attacking the victims, which isn't really a good look. I mean, we have to consider that these women at the time were teenagers, and we have to have some sympathy for these people. And I think the why now thing is, if you know anything about journalism, it's hard to get people to come out on the record because look at what he's talking about doing to them now. I mean, it's just one of those things where why now is because that's that's when the story was able to break, not because of some nefarious, otherworldly forces that are coming down on him.
And what conflicts do you see, if any, in his statement today? He was also on Fox over the phone last night, and we've heard a variation of things from him, right? From, I can't recall, to now really remembering that absolutely it didn't happen at all. So which is it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question, and only I guess he and these women and their supporters can answer that. But I think maybe it's one of those things where he didn't forcefully deny it enough, and now his people are probably saying, "Listen, you have to say that you didn't do it because you're getting picked apart on that."
So his support. And the sentiments in Alabama and in his circles is very different from some of the sentiments from leadership coming out of Washington. Which is more influential that could potentially impact the outcome of the vote come 4.5 weeks from now?
Well, all politics is local, and in Alabama, you never... It's so easy to run against the federal government. So it's so easy to run against the establishment. We've been doing it since George Wallace and probably before that. And so I think that the local people, local politicians, if they would have something to say about it, I think would have a much bigger impact than anybody in Washington, because he's already basically thumbed his nose at them and beat their fair-haired boy, the appointed Senator Luther Strange. And so I just don't think that really, the only thing that does, I think, is steals his resolve and his supporters' resolve. The question is about voters in the middle, or voters who might, generally support the Republican. Are they gonna stick with Moore? Are they gonna stick with the Republican brand? That's anybody's guess right now.
All right, David Mowry, we'll leave it right there. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Show host David Mowry is a political consultant based in Montgomery, Alabama. One of his specialties is crisis management. So, David, I will start with you. It's hard to determine how much support Roy Moore has in the state of Alabama. I've seen some polls show that the Democrat could beat him, which would be pretty darned amazing in the state of Alabama.
Yeah, it is hard to determine, and when you speak electorally, the question is, what's the turnout going to be? Does this get people that don't generally like his brand of politics but are still Republicans to stay home? Does it energize Democrats? I don't think anybody can answer the question. I do know that you can tell by what the deafening silence, I think, from Alabama politicians, you can tell where they think this thing is going to end up.
But, David, if Roy Moore is elected, those who serve on the Senate right now have an obligation to pay attention to the ethics and the morality of those who serve. So they would have every right, if they think these allegations against Roy Moore are true, to kick him out.
Look, there are rules that govern the body, and they can do what they want. But I do hear what John's saying, in that there is a principle of one man, one vote in this country, and whether you find the behavior or you find his behavior in the past reprehensible, if the people of Alabama duly elect him, it's going to be hard for them not to seat him, and it's going to be very interesting to see what they do if they throw him out. So, I mean, it's a pretty big, it's a pretty big crisis, I think, because in the end, I think that there's still a good chance that if you listen to what John said about 101 to 1, I think it's probably twice that on conservative radio here in Alabama. And so it's like that might be what we get to, and then things I think will get even more interesting.
See what happens a couple of weeks from now. John Fredericks, David Mowry, thanks to both of you.
Thanks, Carol.
Thank you, Carol and David.
Democratic strategist, and David Mowry, he's an Alabama political consultant who's worked for both Republicans and Democrats. Let's start with taxes, though. David, let me bring you in on the other issue that Republicans are facing right now, a tough issue that Republicans are facing. What to do about Roy Moore? You just heard me speak with Stephen Law. He's the head of the super PAC that spent a lot of money on that primary between Luther Strange and Roy Moore. And he says there's a lot of options out there. We just need to figure out which is the right one. What is the impact of the options that are being discussed by Mitch McConnell, Paul Ryan, now even Jeff Sessions piling on and saying that he's basically lining up against Roy Moore? Is it starting to impact on the ground?
I don't really think so. Roy Moore isn't going to do. He's not going to do anything to get off the ballot. He's been thrown off 3 courts: the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court again, and the Gadsden Food Court. So there's nothing that he's going to do to let himself be off the ballot. And they don't have a viable option right now. Sessions isn't a viable option, is he? Because he even said, I don't even really want to return to the Senate. But while you were talking to Stephen, I came up with a really good idea. There's a Republican out there that might do it and might be able to win, and everybody in Alabama knows how to spell his name. It's Charles Barkley.
There you go. Joining me right now, CNN political director David Chalian, CNN special correspondent Jamie Gangel, and David Mowry. He's an Alabama political consultant who's worked with both Republican and Democratic campaigns. Great to see all of you. If it could be expected in any race, it would be in this one. David Mowry, what's surprising you from the ground coming out of this poll to you?
Well, Kate, you got me out of trig class, so I'm here. I think what we're hearing is that obviously women don't like this. If you look at that poll, women are moving away from Moore, but I think that they showed that men were actually more likely to vote for him, which is exactly sort of what happened in the 2012 race against him. Anything that you said bad about him, women didn't like, but men sort of rallied around the flag for Roy Moore. And the interesting thing is Doug Jones is right at 50%. And so usually, you want to see yourself over 50 if you think you have a chance to win. And as the other David just said, I think that there's a lot of time left, and there's a lot of time for more allegations, but there's also a lot of time for Moore to sort of rally his base and say this isn't true and just push back and maybe win.
From you on the ground, there is time left, as you've said, in this race. But so with the governor saying that the race isn't changing the date, the Alabama Republican Party saying they're standing by Moore, what are you watching for now in the final weeks before voters vote?
I think that I'm looking at what the reaction of both campaigns are. I think the Franken thing is a gift to Moore, that he should push back and say, look, you have a senator from the other side doing this or whatever. And I'm also looking for, are more accusations going to come out, and do the Jones people take advantage of it? Do they target women specifically? Or can we, you had that big thing about issues. They were talking about issues yesterday. Why is nobody talking about the F-35 fighter in Montgomery? Why aren't they talking about littoral ships in Mobile? There are actual issues that who our next senator is affect the economy and the livelihood of actual Alabamians, and nobody's talking about that. That's what I would pivot to if I was either of these guys.
Well, when your candidacies become part of a national conversation, sometimes talking about the F-35 isn't where things are going to land and end up. Great to see you all. Thank you so much.
Joining me now to talk about whether any of this would affect the race whatsoever in a couple of weeks between Moore and Democrat Doug Jones is David Mowry, chairman of the Mowry Consulting Group. He's a political and public affairs correspondent based in Alabama. So, David, nice to see you.
Good to see you too, Brooke. Thanks.
All right. So, Lee Corfman says she wasn't at all paid, despite what some folks in Alabama are trying to put out there. Again, she's voted Republican, but this isn't about politics. Will any of that matter one iota to Roy Moore supporters there in Alabama?
I don't know if that matters, but I do think that her talking directly to the camera and her being very emphatic and empathetic about her story and the way that she was taken advantage of. I think that putting a face to a name and words out of her own mouth are definitely powerful to something that could just be seen as like a rehash of a news story that came out last week. I thought it was pretty powerful testimony.
So you think it might change minds?
Well, I don't know about this specifically, but in the aggregate, I think that that it does change minds. I don't know that people necessarily her saying that she's voted Republican, her saying that she's not profited. Those are good check marks in the box. But in the end, I think that it's the totality of the allegations that will have an effect. If it does have, if anything has an effect, it'll be the totality.
Okay. Let's talk about this group of evangelical pastors who've been vociferous in their defense of a man facing all kinds of allegations, including the improper touching of Lee Corfman as a then 14-year-old. But you understand Alabamians, and why do you think, David? Why do you think ideology seems to be trumping personal transgressions for these religious leaders?
Well, I think that Roy Moore has been a champion for them for years. He's somebody that they've fought alongside. As he's been, elected to and then thrown off the Supreme Court twice. And now, they feel like they're invested in him. And, it's sort of like, are you going to just dump something that you fought for and something that you fought with over something that apparently happened 40 years ago and he says isn't true? It's just, it's just typical politics as usual. People, retreat to their tribes and retreat to their corners, and they fight it out, and that's why it's such tough sledding for the Jones campaign.
Sure. Just last question. We know that the White House Legislative Affairs Director Mark Short said this yesterday. If Trump didn't believe that the women's accusations were credible, he would be down campaigning for Roy Moore. He has not done that. He has concerns about the accusations, but he is also concerned that these accusations are 38 years old. Do we know, David, if President Trump ever had plans to campaign for Roy Moore in Alabama? And do you even think the president's presence would help him?
Well, he did say that if Roy Moore won the runoff, that he would definitely come down and campaign for him. And he thought that he was a good guy and a good candidate. So I think if we can take him at his word on Twitter, then, yeah, I think he did have plans to if he needed it. But, the thing that I would say about those comments is if I was the Jones campaign, I'd be putting that on TV. I'd be talking about how, that Roy Moore's been abandoned by his allies and abandoned by President Trump, who's supposed to be the working man and, the average person's champion right now.
Well, we still have a couple weeks before that special election. We'll tune in to see if that pops up in the ads. David Mowry, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you. Let me bring in my panel. Rebecca Berg is a CNN political reporter. David Mowry is a political consultant in Alabama who's worked on both Republican and Democratic campaigns in the state. So welcome. Good morning to both of you. Rebecca, now that's the president. Let's talk Alabama. David, I was reading that strategists on both sides believe the race will really come down to whether the Democrat in this race, Doug Jones, can convince suburban Republican women from the state's larger cities that Moore is unacceptable. And so reading the Daily Beast this morning saying that the Republican women in Alabama have been shaken against the accusations against Roy Moore, and some of them have even now been going door to door canvassing for the Democrat. Are you hearing stories like that?
Anecdotally, yeah, but it doesn't seem like they're moving en masse. I think the big question is, do they vote at all?
Do they, the Republican women who had been supporting Moore, you're saying they may just withhold their votes?
Yeah, they may just, exactly. Because, I think there's a conflict and they really want a Republican to win that seat. They want Republican control. They support Trump's agenda, but they don't really like Roy Moore. So the easiest thing to do there is to just not vote and let the chips fall where they may.
So does President Trump, David, go to Alabama? When he was talking yesterday to media, he didn't rule it out, right? The notion of going to Alabama, being on the ground, stumping for Roy Moore. How much do you think, a couple more weeks left until the December 12th special election, how much does that help Roy Moore?
I think it definitely helps him, and I think that they're going to make that assessment based on poll numbers and based on where they think that the race is at the time. If they feel that he needs it to get over the line, it would not shock me at all to see him come, and it wouldn't shock me at all to see that either move or motivate voters that weren't going to vote to go to the polls, especially, his base of the white working class white men, I think would go stronger for Roy Moore at that point. I think that would be an indicator, though, that the race is closer than even we all think it is.
We know that Doug Jones is capitalizing on some of this, depending on how you look at it, bad press, right, for Roy Moore. What's his winning strategy? 30 seconds. Winning strategy in these waning weeks.
Winning strategy is drive home the fact that he's a tough federal prosecutor, that he has the type of background that most Alabamians identify with, and that Roy Moore is just is morally not fit for the job, and that the Republicans will throw him out even if they elect him.
David and Rebecca, thank you both so much.
Thanks.
Appreciate you. Happy early Thanksgiving. Thank you.
Joining me now are two people who know Alabama politics well. John Hammontree is an opinion and commentary writer for AL.com, and David Mowry is a longtime political consultant and chairman of the Mowry Consulting Group. Moore in the primary, that did not matter. Roy Moore won the primary. The president now basically is saying he supports Roy Moore, that he believes his denials. Is that going to matter to Alabamans?
I don't know that it necessarily matters. It didn't matter in the primary and it didn't matter in the runoff because local dynamics, overwhelm that. And I think that that's the same here, that local dynamics are going to decide who people vote for and, if Jones wins, more so than anything that's coming out of Washington, except for the Post's original reporting about these women, which kind of threw the grenade in the middle of the whole thing.
David, these allegations are not news to you, maybe the specifics of them, but the fact that Roy Moore had a thing for young girls isn't news to you. You said that in your role as campaign manager for Moore's opponent in 2012 for his race for Chief Justice, when you were there with Bob Vance, you had said that there had been a rumor about this for a while. If that's true, and tell me if I'm wrong, if I'm misreading that, why didn't it come out then?
Well, rumors, but more about just sexual impropriety or just kind of weirdness with women, not anything specific that you could point to. And I think that the bigger spotlight on this race gave somebody the impetus and gave them the budget to put reporters on the ground locally that could find the story, and they found the story. As you know, sometimes it can be pretty hard to break stories no matter what the rumors are or who says what. You got to get people on record. So I think that's really what it was just having the resources and the reason to do it.
Yeah, let's be honest about the timing of this. It's not just, hey, I have this him in Alabama. Gentlemen, thank you very much. AL.com.
Thank you.
Opinion writer John Hammontree and longtime political consultant David Mowry. Appreciate having you. We'll see you soon.
Let's now bring in somebody who knows Alabama politics well, chairman of Mowry Consulting Group in Montgomery, Alabama, David Mowry. David, so we now have the president sharpening that pencil, if you can say that, on his view of this race. And before that, they were playing it a little bit more careful through the statements coming from the White House press secretary. Now the president coming out and saying and attacking the Democratic candidate there. David, are you there?
Yeah, is there a question?
Yes.
Sorry.
So the question now, David, is how important is this tweet? He is sharpening his pencil. What do you make of it?
I think it allows people that want to be more partisans, that are definitely Republicans. It gives them cover to go to the polls and vote for the guy that they may not like, but they certainly don't like the views of the people that Jones would be working with. I think it allows that, and I think that. I think it allows people that are sort of sick of hearing about this. Yeah. It says, okay, well, the president's for him, so maybe I should re-engage.
Is it the margin of victory there? Because it's been so close. We've been seeing, and I'll show you some of the RCP, Real Clear Politics average of Alabama polls. When we look at the numbers here, Doug Jones, 46.8, Roy Moore, 46. Really, really close. I don't know which way you're seeing this on the polls that you've been watching.
I've got some information from some people, and I just feel like I do feel like Moore is a little bit has closed the gap or has stopped the falling. If you're Jones, you're concerned because that's not over 50. But then again, if you're Moore, you're concerned because Moore should be at 55 or 60 really because he's the Republican. And so I think it is a jump ball, and I think it's one of those cliche things that comes down to who the heck comes out and votes. Do people that are sick of hearing about this just say, I'm not going to vote, and then do the two tribes, come in and fight?
Yeah, the two tribes. And now we've been talking about the right on the left side. When you look at Democrats, one of the headlines coming out of local news there is, will the African-American voters show up? 1 out of 4 voters potentially in the state. And are they activated? Are they energized for this candidate? As energized as they were for Barack Obama, not for Hillary Clinton?
I don't think that they are as engaged as they need to be or as energized as they need to be for Jones to win. They can probably change that in the next couple weeks, with GOTV techniques or whatever. Yeah. But I'm not seeing a lot of engagement on the ground where I am, which is in Montgomery.
David, 15 seconds. What are we missing on this story right now that you've been watching on the ground?
I think that everybody in Washington is missing that they're a lot more passionate than anybody in Alabama is about it. Alabamians are sick of hearing about it and just kind of want this thing to go away no matter who wins.
No matter who wins. David Mowry, thank you so much, sir. Always good to have an expert on the ground there. Appreciate it. Still ahead.
Joining me now, Chris Saliza, reporter and editor-at-large for CNN Politics. David Mowry, he's a political consultant in Alabama who has worked for both Republican and Democratic campaigns. David, what is more important right now a week out? The money that the RNC is offering up, or just the headlines of the Trump and the RNC, endorsements a week out?
Oh, it's easily just the Trump RNC Bannon thing. I mean, I kind of think that the cake might be baked already, that people were tuning this out. I mean, people in Alabama cared much more about the SEC championship game, go Dogs, and they cared about Alabama getting into the playoffs, then they're really paying attention to this. There's only been 3 special elections in Alabama in December since 1913. And so there's really no precedence here for what turnout will look like. But in our world of, tweets and quick news cycles, it's just that Trump's back in. Hey, that's our man. They see that. And the people that vote in special elections, people that vote in every election are going to vote in this special election. The people that you have to try to get out to vote in this election, I don't know that they're being engaged, and I don't see a surge anywhere.
And Dave will tell you this.
So,
Donald Trump is a very popular figure in the Alabama Republican Party.
Very popular.
At this point, is there just no persuadable voter?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, Bannon, all you're trying to do is rally the base. Bannon represents the seething id of the Republican Party, and that's basically where a lot of Alabama is at, especially when you look at your most likely voters. When you look at people that have voted in every election for the last 4 or 5 cycles or whatever, those people are hardcore Republicans. They're older, and they're going to look at this and they're going to say, hey, look, I've tuned out all this stuff. I don't really know if it's true or if it's not true. It's just, but I'm going to go vote, and I'm probably going to, I'm going to go vote for Roy Moore now.
I will say it is disheartening, no matter where you land on the political spectrum, if folks say just like, I'm tuning it all out as new information may come in before an election, for someone who has a huge impact on your state, on the nation for 6 years at least. I don't know. That's just me.
Well,
great to see you, Chris. Great to see you, David.
Right.
Let's see what happens. David says this cake is baked.
With us now, chairman of Mowry Consulting Group in Montgomery, Alabama, David Mowry, and he'll be out on the campaign trail. At least that's what we're hearing. David, this outsiders coming into the state of Alabama, trying to be part of this election process, and it's been said that no, that's not what Alabamians want, but. Now, in the final days, we're getting lots of outsiders. Does it help one side more than the other? Does it hurt one side more than the other?
I think that it probably, Bannon and those types of guys coming down here probably helps more than, say, a Cory Booker or somebody who, let's face it, is a national Democrat. It's hard to say, hey, look, I'm a different kind of Democrat. I share your Alabama values when you're bringing in national people that don't really share, Alabama values, or that's how Alabama perceives it. I want to say one thing, too, about Moore and not being on the campaign trail. It's freezing down here, all right? People don't like the cold, but he's on TV. You know what GOTV stands for? Yep. Get on television. And I see a Moore ad every 10 seconds when I'm watching TV. During the Army-Navy game, all that type of stuff. So I think that's overblown, personally.
Overblown that he is not on the road because he's on TV and you see all of the advertisements, is what you're saying?
Correct. Yeah, I hear the radio ads. I see the Facebook ads. I see the, all the other stuff. I saw Bill Britt's thing this morning. Yeah. 10 friends had emailed it to me. And yeah, I mean, people don't necessarily generally go to big public events for things like this unless it's something big, like the Jason Isbell thing. I'm sure was probably pretty big. I would have gone to see Jason Isbell, whether that would influence my vote or not. I don't know.
Michael Rabin, David, also our local Alabamian there.
Yeah, I think that the point is that the cake is probably baked. I don't think anybody's paying attention, but I think it's 50-50. We'll see what happens Tuesday.
50-50. We're hearing that a lot. All right, thank you all four. David Mowry, Matt Bennett, Michael Rubino, Beth Clayton.
Thank you.
Next.
Joining me right now with more on this, David Mowry. He's a political consultant in Alabama who's worked on both Republican and Democratic campaigns in the state. David, when was the last time any politician looked long-term when it came to the state of play? David Mowry, it is no small thing when the senior senator from Alabama comes out yesterday, 2 days before they vote, to say he can't vote for Moore. Shelby is not a guy who is chasing cable news interviews. He doesn't do a ton of interviews. He knew exactly what he was doing when he spoke up to Jake. What's the impact of that?
Senator Shelby, you're correct, is very, very cagey and a great long-term politician in our seat. I think that has an effect on your moderate voter that probably doesn't like Moore. That might give them a little bit more, entree to say, okay, I'm going to go out and either write in a Republican or vote for Doug Jones. The Trump robocall really gets to the Republican base and that is larger than either of these other two groups. And then the third group is who they're sending the Obama robocall to, and who they brought Senator Booker and Governor Patrick and those guys into the state to talk to. And so you got these sort of like three countervailing winds, and I think it's anybody's guess as to which one, blows the strongest tomorrow.
What do you think, though, David, of the timing, that he comes out just 2 days before? No coincidence there?
No coincidence, and it's a Sunday show where people that are focused, that were highly involved voters are looking, and they're looking for signals that would give them cover to vote either way, and I think that's a pretty big signal to voters like that. The question is how big is that group compared to the Trump base and the Obama base? You got to figure Trump got 63% in this state, and Obama not exactly the most popular among the 60% of voters that self-ID as Republicans.
And they say if they don't want Roy Moore, they don't know what their alternative that they're going to choose is. That's a huge question here. Great to see you all. Thank you so much.
For many in Alabama, the vote for or against Roy Moore is like a moral and political tug of war. Republicans are clearly divided over the Alabama Senate race, but in a deeply religious, deep red state, it raises the question if voters will send Moore to Capitol Hill as a senator, an accused child molester as a possible U.S. senator. Therein lies the moral and political dilemma. With me now to talk about that is David Mowry, an independent political and public affairs consultant, and Joyce Vance, who is a lecturer in law at the University of Alabama. Welcome to both of you.
How are you?
Hi, Carol. Good. Happy to have you here. So, David, I want to ask you this question. Alabama, sure. Its reputation, has it been hurt by all that's been going on throughout this special election?
Well, I think you even go back further to the sex scandal and all that caused the governor to resign, that caused him to appoint Luther Strange, that caused this whole, that caused Moore to be the Republican nominee. I think that in some ways people think that that's typical, but what I hear from all my friends that are down here, reporting on this election is that they're interested in how angry the electorate can seem on one side or the other, but also how nice they are to visitors, and how everybody's been very courteous and happy to help them get stories and stuff like that. So I'm going to say on the whole it hasn't been hurt yet, but we'll see what happens tonight.
Yes, we will. But here's the thing, David. So if he wins and he goes into the U.S. Senate, senators can turn him into a pariah. They can say, we're not appointing you to any committee that makes any difference at all. I mean, they can thwart him, right?
Yeah, I mean, they can, but, I think that kind of plays into his hands. I mean, the guy has been thrown out of the last two jobs that he was elected to pretty swiftly via his actions. And so it's almost like that's, part of a pattern. And it's, he would probably welcome that, because then you don't have to do the work and you get all the benefits, plus you get to raise money, on your side for your people.
Oh, my gosh. Well, that's a different way to put it. I have to leave it there. David Mowry, Joyce Vance, thanks so much.
Roy Moore will be heading to his polling station to vote shortly. We will bring that to you when it comes, and he again will be keeping with the old adage: if it isn't broke, don't fix it. And he's going to be arriving on horseback. His horse, named Sally, along with his wife Kayla. We'll bring you those pictures as soon, of course, as they come in. Joining me right now, though, Alex Burns, CNN political analyst and national political reporter for the New York Times. David Mowry, political consultant in Alabama, who's worked on both Republican and Democratic campaigns in the state. And CNN political reporter Rebecca Berg. Great to see all of you. All right, I love to, on game day, to play games, so you guys have to actually play along with me. That means it is game time. A little game I like to call It All Comes Down to, but you can't, as Alex just did, you cannot use the word turnout. Absolutely not. And David, because I am the ref, I can use the word turnout. The Secretary of State says he expects modest turnout, something like 20-25%. It was something like 64% in the 2016 election turnout was. With that in mind, what do you think it all comes down to? Is it the letter, is it the name of the candidate, or the letter after the name?
I think it's always going to be the letter after the name, but I would like to add to what was said earlier. I think you got to look at Shelby County and Baldwin County, which are rock rib Republican bastions, and then you got to figure what the overall African American turnout is versus the overall women turnout. And there's your dynamic. Jones essentially has to get about 150,000 crossover votes, or whatever that percentage is, right, that you're talking about. That's the difference. And I mean, that's just hard math. I'm not in the prediction game, but I will say that a lot of times, maybe it comes down to $20 million spent for Jones and $4 million or whatever in the aggregate spent for more. You know, does money overcome crazy?
Well, does money overcome, no matter how you're going to describe it? Soon we will. Alex wins because he's literally the only one who didn't use the word turnout. Guys, you got to follow the rules. So, David, Charles Barkley last night was stumping for Doug Jones, and I actually dawned on me when he took the stage that after the primary, you threw out his name as a possible write-in on the show for the seat. What do you make, though, of his pitch last night? Essentially saying, this is Alabama's chance to, in his words, quote unquote, show the country that we're not a bunch of damn idiots.
You know, a lot of times when you give people that choice and you say it that starkly, they kind of go the other way. They say, if you think I'm an idiot, watch me. So I don't know that I would have made that exact pitch. But Charles has his own way with words. And,
yes,
you know, whether you're Alabama or Auburn, you don't fault him, you know. And so I think having him there helps either way. But I want to go back to one thing that Alex said, and that's that I think a month ago, if you'd have asked us what the craziest story in Alabama was going to be, it was that Robert Bentley resigned because of a sex scandal, and now we're all sitting here waiting on, you know, what's going to happen in this race. And no matter what happens, that's going to be the craziest story of the year in politics in Alabama.
It truly has. Alex, when you were laying it out, I was reading it on Twitter, it's truly an amazing series of events and how things have gotten to today. Rebecca, Steve Bannon back in the state last night, true to form last night, hitting the media, hitting Mitch McConnell, hitting Bob Corker, hitting basically every other Republican other than Roy Moore at this point. And then he said this.
Let's talk about that and more with David Mowery. He's an Alabama-based independent political and public affairs consultant and chairman of the Mowery Consulting Group. Welcome back.
How are you?
I'm good. Has Mr. Moore even conceded yet?
No, he hasn't. But, you know, the fact remains, Carol, that no matter what, he doesn't have to concede for Doug Jones to be the next senator from, you know, the state of Alabama. Secretary Merrill said, I believe they'll certify the votes. The latest it'll be is the 3rd of January, and I think the earliest will be Tuesday. And once they do that, you know, and there's not enough votes to sway the election. I mean, he doesn't need to concede. The only reason that he would have to is that if he wanted a shred of dignity. And, you know, with this post and that type of stuff, it looks like he doesn't.
Why did he post that?
You know, I mean, I obviously don't, you know, I don't know the man, but, you know, I mean, thinking, you know, armchair quarterbacking it, I would say that, like you said, it's a dog whistle. It's, you know, and you know, the disgusting thing about it is I think it's an attempt to shame Doug Jones for his son, you know, living a lifestyle that you know that he's born into. It's not, you know what I mean? But these are people that think that that's a choice, you know, and I just think that that's where the wrongness comes out in it, you know, is that
it's just
him trying to shame Senator Jones.
And smear him when the election is over. He can't bring himself to concede. And I understand that the Secretary of State in the state of Alabama has been checking out some, like, voter fraud claims that came to nothing. Who's sending him all this stuff?
Well, there was some kind of, I don't know, there was some kind of thing about a kid who was here canvassing and I think misspoke, and he said, we're here to vote and canvass, and they took this as like this vast conspiracy. But let me tell you what, we do have one of the strictest voter ID laws in the country, and Secretary Merrill has been clear that there's been no voter fraud in this election. But, you know, I mean, I guess he feels like he wants to check out the claims so that he can, you know, then say, look, no, this is a fair and honest election. And Roy Moore, you lost, dude. But Carol, this is just a pattern. It's a consistent pattern of ghoulish behavior that got people from the Alabama Young Republican Federation and Senator Shelby to pull their support from Roy Moore. It's the same old. And I guess, you know, but that's part of the reason that he lost as well.
What does the future hold for Roy Moore?
You know, that's a good question. Obviously, you know, he's trying to raise this election integrity fund money, and, you know, I'm sure that he'll go on and fight the good fights. You know, I guess it's a little worrisome that he can still draw as many votes as he did, and could he jump into another race and shake that up? Probably. You know, or he could just go back to living off the foundation money or raising money for, you know, for his foundation for moral law or whatever. I really don't know.
It'll be interesting, though. Maybe he'll fade away into the woodwork.
It's always interesting. It's always interesting.
That's true, to say the least. David Mowery, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you, too.